Let us now look at, we could say, one of the most famous Buddhist philosophical treatises of all times, the Abhidharmakosha, and I here include the Bhashya, the commentary, and even the sub-commentary. We will see, in most cases, adhikara in the Abhidharmakosha has the same sense that we just found in grammar, of something still having jurisdiction or still functioning, or even though it's not repeated. So, for example, when we say dhatavaha iti adhikaraha, that means that the word dhatavaha, although not repeated, still functions here. It's the same sense that we found in the grammatical treatises. The passage which I find most intriguing in relation to this is the sub-commentary to the sentence Shatagrahanam tu Purva Adhikarat, because here Yashomitra, the sub-commentator, tells us that it is the Buddha himself which had established the adhikara of a certain word. So, what Yashomitra is implying is that although adhikara might be a concept which we find in grammar, so a technical concept of a commentary, is nevertheless the idea is there itself in the words of the Buddha. And here he derives the adhikara of word 100, shata, from its occurrence in a sutra passage. So you see this passage, Yascha Tidyagyonigatanam Shataya Danam Dadyat, this is a sutra, so it's words of a Buddha for Yashomitra. And we find there the word Shataya and Shatagunaha. So the word Shata, 100, appears twice. And from these he derives that Shata has adhikara in this particular context. So in other words, there are some ideas which might look very technical, but if we look more deeply, they are already found in the words of the Buddha. This seems to be implied by these commentarial expansions. The grammatical sense is found in a number of other passages. We also have adhikritya in one of these passages, which is a Lyabanta form but still connected to adhikara, and that means in reference to. And again, this has a similar sense of adhikarana, which we will discuss later. The non-grammatical sense appears a few times. In one passage, for example, explaining the meaning of the word Jambudvipa, relating it to either the tree or the fruit called Jambu. In this, our continent is so called either due to the adhikara of the Jambu tree or due to the adhikara of its fruit. Now, it seems clear that adhikara here does not mean right, but maybe the proper context of activity or the main context of activity. Here is another case where we see the idea of context of activity. Most of us are familiar with the two extremes of reveling in pleasures or mortifying oneself, not necessarily because we experience them ourselves, but I mean from the Buddhist texts. So the Madhyama Pratipad should avoid these two. And these are related to two groups of people in the Abhidharmakosha, namely the Grihi and Prabrajita. So the householders, the Grihin, are the ones who mostly are related to this extreme of reveling in pleasures, while the Prabrajita, those who are ordained or have gone forth, are mostly related to the context of atmaklamata, the context of mortifying oneself, more or less. But this is not the right. That's not the sense. It's what these two extremes mostly refer to. The context of reference, perhaps, which is related to the idea of a right in the sense of the proper context of an activity, but let me stress, it's not the same thing. In the Vinaya Vastu, we find the word adhikarika actually, but of course it's connected to adhikara, used in an important sense of worshipping the Buddha. So this particular sense is what we find often in sutra literature and very often in Pali, as we will see later. But let us quickly look at the Brahma Sutra, where the term Manushya Adhikara appears, which seems very close to Manava Adhikara. Manushya being a perfect synonym, I think, of Manava. Hridi apekshaya tu Manushya Adhikaratvat. So this is about how Brahman relates to sentient beings or human beings. I think that is the idea here. And it doesn't mean really a right. I think this is more like a limitation, in fact. How a human being can function in the context of Brahman, maybe. In Pali, we'll find that the most recurrent sense of adhikara is that of worship Buddha. So all these examples establish adhikara as a synonym of worship, adhikiryam, sakkaram, upakaram, mahantam puja sakkaram, adhika karo. Now you see what this shows also is that the idea that adhi means adhika is the same that we had in the commentary to the Amarakosha. Adhiko, upakaro, adhiko, karo, etc. The grammatical sense is also found in grammatical treatises, so we have the expression adhikara suttam. I think that what is closest to the idea of right in Pali is the grammatical sense, not the other one, because the grammatical sense refers to the context of an activity, which is maybe closer to the idea of a right rather than the acts of worship. As a Vinaya term, both in Sanskrit and Pali, adhikarana means a dispute. This might be of interest partly because this has to do with the juridical setting, which is echoed in the term right. So here there's an overlap of concerns which goes through the Vinaya, and here's an example of two passages where we have practically the same list in Sanskrit and Pali. It's a list of 4 different types of disputes. In grammar, both in Pali and Sanskrit, adhikarana is the context of an action, broadly understood as its locus in time or space. So, ekasmin samaye Bhagavan Rajagrihe viharati sma. At one time, the Bhagavan was staying in Rajgir. Both at one time and in Rajgir function as adhikarana, where the location in time and place, the context of the action. And I think that's an important meaning of adhikarana. But all this discussion, which actually is rather short because we could and maybe should analyze these terms further, well, I wanted to point out differences. I wanted to point out differences to open a few questions. I would say that no clear-cut concept of human right can be found in the original Sanskrit or Pali. Now, this does not mean that Buddhist authors actively believe that humans should not have rights. That's not the point. My point is that they might have dealt with similar concerns through different concepts. And this brings us to the other questions. Do Buddhist societies need a concept of human right? Or can they function well by relying on their own intellectual traditions? Have they functioned well by relying on their own intellectual traditions? How did Buddhist societies address the same type of concerns that are addressed by the UN through the concept of human rights? Let me offer an example. Let us say that one wishes to say that a government should have an unreserved commitment to protecting human rights. Fine. What if we substitute that with a government should have an unreserved commitment to minimizing the suffering of sentient beings? Which of those sentences functions better, and why? I think this kind of question is legitimate, and employing terminology and conceptual frameworks which come from the Buddhist tradition is a worthwhile intellectual engagement which could have beneficial effects. And I think it is the human right of the Buddhist intellectual tradition to do so. There is no reason to discard Buddhist ideas and concepts and uncritically adopt concepts which come from outside. At the very least, it might be worth considering the possibility that the Buddhist tradition has the intellectual resources to tackle with similar concerns. I think it does, but I would like to propose this at the very least as a possibility. Let me add that among the various terms and usages that we found, interestingly, maybe it's the grammatical context of adhikara which comes closest to the usage of the word right in English, more than any other usage of adhikara or adhikarana which I have found. And this is often the case. I have to say that we find that grammar is an interesting key to understand basic usages of Sanskrit technical terms. Apart from that, I'd like to repeat that this is not a criticism of human rights as such, but rather a criticism of the idea that a specific context from a non-Buddhist culture should be uncritically taken to be superior to anything already found in the Buddhist tradition. And I would like to invite everyone to consider this possibility that maybe the same concerns can be addressed by Buddhist societies in different ways. Thank you.